Story 1. The Basement That Whispers. If you ever hear a voice calling your name from a dark basement, don't answer. Because sometimes it's not calling you to help, it's calling you to join. I was never the kind of person who believed in ghosts. Sure, I enjoyed horror movies, scary podcasts, and reading about paranormal cases online, but deep down, I always thought it was all just entertainment, fiction. That changed the day I moved into the old Wilkins house, the move-in. It was early October when I got the keys. The house had been on the market for years. People said it was too far from the city or too old for modern buyers, but I knew the truth. The price was ridiculously low for a two-story home with a full basement. The realtor's smile was a little too forced when I signed the papers. "There's a lot of history here," she said. "You might hear things. The old place creaks." I laughed it off. Old houses always have noises. The first week was fine. Quiet. Too quiet, actually. No neighbors within sight. Just trees, wind, and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. But the second week, I heard it. The first whisper. It was 11:47 p.m. I was in bed, scrolling through my phone when I heard a voice. Soft, female. "Daniel?" I froze. The sound wasn't from outside my window. It was coming from inside the house. Specifically, from the basement. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the pipes. Maybe I was tired. But then I heard it again, a little louder this time. "Daniel, come down." The basement door. The basement was one of the creepiest parts of the house. The door to it was in the kitchen. Old wood with peeling white paint. The kind that seemed to hold decades of fingerprints. I stood there that night, holding the doorknob, feeling cold air seep from the cracks. Logic told me to just close it, lock it, and go to bed. But curiosity pulled me in. The wooden steps groaned as I descended, my phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. Halfway down, the smell hit me. Damp, musty, like old earth, and something else. Metallic. The light flickered against the stone walls. There was nothing down there, just the old furnace, some broken furniture, and boxes covered in dust. And then, right behind me, a whisper. Closer, the cold touch. I spun around, shining the light, but nothing was there. Then I felt it. A cold, bony hand brushed the back of my neck. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the door behind me, my heart trying to break through my ribs. Research. The next day, I called the realtor and demanded to know the history of the house. At first, she hesitated, but eventually she told me about the Wilkins family. They'd lived here in the 1960s. Mrs. Wilkins was strange. Neighbors said she practiced old country rituals, and her husband was never seen after 1972. The official story was that he left her and their daughter, but locals whispered that he never left the house. Mrs. Wilkins died in that basement, found at the bottom of the stairs with her neck broken. The daughter vanished a few years later, no trace. Escalation. Over the next week, the whispering grew more frequent. Sometimes I'd hear two voices, one calling me softly, the other lower, angrier, almost growling. The basement door began opening on its own. Lights would flicker, and I'd find wet footprints on the kitchen floor. Small, bare footprints leading to the basement door. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. The night of the blackout. It happened on the 13th night. A storm knocked out the power, plunging the house into darkness. I lit a candle and sat in the living room, trying to ignore the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then I heard it. The whisper, but this time it was right behind me. "Daniel, help me." The candle went out. The basement ritual. Something grabbed my wrist in the dark and yanked me toward the kitchen. Story 2. The basement that wasn't empty. I'd been living in my small, two-story rental home for just over a month when my landlord casually mentioned that the basement door was best left locked. At first I thought he meant it for safety reasons. Old houses can have unstable floors, exposed wiring, or just piles of junk you're not supposed to touch. But the way he said it, with his eyes not quite meeting mine, made me pause. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press him. Still, that door was in the hallway between the kitchen and living room, impossible to ignore. It was painted the same pale beige as the rest of the walls, but the brass doorknob was cold to the touch, even in summer. The first few weeks were uneventful, until the noises began, the sounds beneath my feet. It started with faint tapping, like something metallic bumping against the basement pipes. I assumed it was just old plumbing, but then the tapping became footsteps, slow, deliberate, one at a time. I remember one night in particular. I'd just turned off the TV and was heading upstairs when I heard it. Creak, pause, creak. The steps didn't match the rhythm of anyone walking around normally. They sounded intentional, almost as if the person was placing each foot carefully to avoid detection. I froze halfway up the staircase. My house was locked, windows shut, and there was no reason anyone should be in the basement. I tried telling myself it was my imagination, but then came the whispering. It wasn't words at first, just soft, hissing noises, like someone exhaling close to a microphone. The sound seemed to come directly from beneath the floorboards. The neighbor's warning. A few days later, I ran into my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Parker, who'd lived on the street for decades. When I mentioned I was renting the place next door, she gave me a strange look. "Oh, that one," she said quietly. "Schatz, did he tell you about the basement?" I told her only that my landlord suggested keeping it locked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Good, keep it that way. Don't go down there, no matter what you hear." She wouldn't explain further, but her sudden pale expression sent a chill through me. The door opens. About a week later, around 2:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of a doorknob turning. Not the front door, the basement door. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then came the slow, grinding squeak of hinges. My heart started pounding. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept downstairs. The basement door was wide open. I hadn't touched it in weeks, and the landlord kept the key. The air coming up from the opening was icy, far colder than it should have been for mid-July. I leaned over, peering down into the black void. The single bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered on its own, buzzing faintly. That's when I saw movement. Something was at the bottom step, just out of the light. It wasn't a full figure, more like the suggestion of one, a shadow shape, vaguely human, but its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then, in a voice that sounded like a whisper mixed with static, it said, "Come down." The descent. Against all logic, I took one step down, then another. The temperature dropped with every stare. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the hairs on my arms stood up. Halfway down, the light bulb above me went out with a loud pop, pitch black. I froze, clutching the bat so tightly my hands hurt. The air was thick, almost syrupy, pressing against my ears like I'd gone underwater. Somewhere in the darkness, I heard the sound of bare feet slapping against concrete, moving toward me. The face. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness just enough to reveal the far wall, and standing there was a woman, or at least something that looked like a woman. Her hair hung in wet, matted clumps over her face. Her skin was ashen, with dark veins like cracks running down her neck. But her eyes. Story 3. The Man in the Mirror. When my aunt passed away, she left me a few pieces of furniture from her old Victorian house, an antique desk, a cedar chest, and a tall, ornate mirror in a heavy gold frame. The mirror was beautiful, but it made me uneasy from the start. The glass had a faint, almost smoky quality to it, and if I looked long enough, I swore the room behind me seemed different. I told myself it was just old glass warping the reflection. Still, I put it in the spare bedroom and kept the door closed. The first reflection. One night, after a late shift, I went upstairs to grab some laundry from that room. The lights were off, but in the dim moonlight coming through the window, I could still see myself in the mirror. Only, it wasn't exactly me. The figure in the reflection was smiling. I wasn't. I froze, my hands gripping the laundry basket so tightly my knuckles hurt. My own reflection slowly tilted its head, studying me like a stranger. Then it lifted its hand and waved. I dropped the basket and bolted. History of the mirror. The next day I called my mom and mentioned the mirror. She went quiet for a moment, then told me she remembered it from her childhood, and that my aunt had always kept it covered with a sheet. She said it belonged to the house's first owner, Mom said. A man who died under suspicious circumstances. When I asked what that meant, she just said, "The kind you don't talk about." The night visitor. About a week later, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I thought maybe I'd left a window open and the wind had knocked something over. I got up, but the hallway was empty, except for the spare bedroom door. It was standing wide open. The moonlight from the window shone directly on the mirror. And standing inside the reflection, just behind where I would be, was a tall man in a black suit. His face was pale, almost. That gray, and his eyes were hollow pits of shadow. He didn't move. He just stared at me, one hand resting lightly on my shoulder in the reflection. But when I turned to look behind me, the hallway was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the man was closer. The whisper. That night I dreamed of the mirror. I was standing in front of it, unable to move. The man in black was beside me, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. His breath was ice cold against my ear. I woke up with the words still ringing faintly in my head. "You belong here now." The trap. I decided to get rid of the mirror. A friend offered to help me move it out to the curb for trash pickup. But when we tried lifting it, it wouldn't budge. The thing was heavy, sure, but not that heavy. It was like it had anchored itself to the floor. My friend joked, "Maybe it doesn't want to leave." I didn't laugh. The final look. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint tapping, like fingernails against glass. I finally grabbed a flashlight and went into the spare bedroom. The mirror stood there, reflecting me in the pale light, except there were two of me. The second me was behind the glass, pounding softly with both hands, eyes wide with terror. It opened its mouth and screamed soundlessly. Before I could move, the man in black stepped into the reflection, placing his hand on my double's shoulder. My double froze, eyes going blank, and the man slowly turned to look at me. This time, he smiled. The disappearance. The next morning, the mirror was gone. The room was empty except for a faint outline in the carpet where it had stood. I called my friend to ask if he'd moved it. He swore he hadn't, and then told me something that made my stomach drop. "I dreamed about you last night," he said, "but you were on the other side of the glass." I still don't know where the mirror went, but so. Me times, when I pass a shop window or glance into the bathroom mirror, I swear I see someone standing just behind me, wearing a black suit, smiling faintly.